a true DPP player views Jirachi as kind of like the Freddy Krueger of our metagame, because 1-2 Jirachi's coming for you, and you see it in your nightmares, and all you can do is flinch. That cheesy opening aside, this is a very serious, dramatic topic, which I love. And that's why I'm busting out the incredible aspect ratio for this. Actually, I think it's a little skewed, but whatever. That image isn't moving. This is a podcast, once again. So, whereas the other theoretical, like, would XYZ be broken in DPP OU, whatever, videos are kind of far-fetched, because as far as I know, nobody is thinking of testing Mu in DPP, or Advanced for that matter. This one actually has some basis, and it's the opposite. It's not, would this thing that's banned be broken if it was unbanned? It's, should this thing that's allowed be banned? Jirachi is interesting. I personally think Jirachi should not be banned from DPP OU, but I can't really, strongly disagree with someone who thinks it should, who actually plays the tier, by the way, because that's a big thing. And I am going to start this off with some historical context, because A, I love to do so, and B, I think it illuminates my position a little more. And I think it also helps us look at it more clearly, because if someone who doesn't play DPP out most of the year and just like watches SPL games and whatever other tournament games, and then just chimes in with whatever everyone else is saying the latest trends are, it's like, wow, Scarf Lucario is really interesting right now. Wow, that's so cool. It's like, where'd you hear that? Not to rip on those people, of course. There's nothing wrong with that. But all I'm saying is that if that's the extent of your DPP experience, then yeah. So, vis-a-vis Jirachi, I know that some of the best, most experienced players around also want it looked at. So I respect that position. It's not something ludicrous like ban Clefable. It's too good against all my. I'm really holding in like 16 unrelated tangents right now. I'm trying to stay on topic. So yeah, Jirachi. Okay, so before we get into my beloved historical context, then the reason why one would want to ban Jirachi, as I'm sure is obvious, is not because, oh my god, it's moveset versatility, wow, it's crazy. No, it's because Iron Head is very oppressive. There's no denying that. And that's why, even though I don't think Jirachi should be banned, or Iron Head should be banned, or whatever, that would actually be my ideal solution if I... But yeah, even though I don't think it should be banned, I can't exactly look down at anyone who thinks it should. It is undeniably the most... I don't know if centralizing is the right word. Shut up, ad. So... No, I can't skip that one. Anyway. Yeah. So it's Iron Head, and it's the fact that checks are not really checks based on RNG, and Jirachi is... Well, we'll get to the full, the exact details after we've gone through the historical steps. So, people have been complaining about Iron Head Jirachi ever since Pokemon Platinum, when it first got the move. Well, it wasn't instantly, because first there was this Pokemon called Shaman Sky running around, doing something similar with Serene Grace Air Slash. But Skyman and Jirachi are worlds apart, of course. So I'm going to try to cut down on the ums, too. I think once I settle into a groove, it should be fine. So, Jirachi... people complain about Jirachi, of course, and during Platinum, Scarf was the most common set. So, of course, oh, well, this 60% flinch move, just slap a Scarf on it, and you're going to flinch everything out. And obviously that didn't quite work, because, as is going to be repeated throughout this video, I'm sure, Steel is not a great attacking type. It doesn't hit a lot super effectively. It most notably hits Tyranitar super effectively, which is big, of course, but that's just T-Tar. And hits a lot of things neutrally, and it's a lot more things for resisted damage. I mean, you don't exactly see, and this is a point that I will be coming back to. A lot of the teams that are like frail against Jirachi's Iron Head, that are just a couple flinches away or whatever, then they are similarly threatened by something like a Scarf Metagross Meteor Mash, which is a lot stronger. So, now, obviously, I'm not saying if your team loses to Jirachi, you're losing to Metagross anyway, or like a Trick Room Bronzong's Gyro Ball spam or something like that. That's not the case. But there is some overlap. Obviously, Jirachi has the luck element that makes it tough, but it's also tougher to pull that off consistently. But again, we'll get back to that. So yeah, Platinum, Scarf Rachi, cool, wasn't really an oppressive force, and that was with monsters like with a lot of with more neutral targets than Salamence was around. So, there was another competing steel type, offensive steel type in Scizor. So, but Jirachi was plenty common, and they used different sets. Sub Calm Mind, Wish Calm Mind popped up during that time. But the Iron Head sets, yeah, okay, Scarf, and then you had Expert Belt sometimes, and that was a cool set, but nothing really oppressive. So then Heart Gold and Soul Silver comes around, more stuff happens, the dragons get banned, Jirachi becomes more into the spotlight. It starts using HP Ground Super Rachi sets more because Heatran is everywhere, so Max Special Attack and Speed, Calm Mind Psychic, HP Ground, and T-Bolt usually, sometimes Grass Type, but usually T-Bolt. Heatran was everywhere, post-Dragons, and Firewater Grass Cores, and a whole other history lesson. So, obviously, getting ahead of myself. Iron Head stuff was still around, Scarf was still common. And people complained about it, of course, especially after Imperfect Luck, or IPL, won the last official Smogon tournament of Generation 4, largely using a Hacks team. The usual suspects, Jirachi, Machamp, Togekiss, and he didn't win the whole thing with it, but it did carry him. Obviously, though, a part of that is Imperfect Luck being one of the greatest players to ever touch the game, because a lot of other players tried to use his exact team and never had any sort of success with it at all. So part of that was just IPL being IPL. But of course, Jirachi Iron Heading stuff is part of DPP's identity. Now, that's not a good reason to keep it, which, of course, I agree with that. But it's I think it's more part of DPP's identity, both historically and in a healthy way. We'll get to why I think it's healthy later. So, and then the metagame is off, goes past its Taylor, Earthworm, Goki, KG, Goofball, Mop, Loki, past its stall phase with Hippo or Swampert, Fori, Restog Gera, Restog Rotom, Blissey, Scarf Tar, or Special Defensive Heatran. That stall team was everywhere, and the metagame eventually moved past that into Firewater Grass offense and stuff, and then a lot of other progressions. And Jirachi was always there. Always, yeah, it's kind of Iron Heading stuff, but it's also kind of... obviously, old metagames can have previously... can have broken elements that were previously not exploited. I mean, look how long Doug Trio existed in DPP, for example. So... I'm not saying, we dealt with Jirachi fine back then, so why is it a problem now? That's not what I'm saying at all. I really don't like that old gens shouldn't be touched thing. Because at this point, old gens are played... It's not like it used to be where old gens were played like once a year for SPL. Because that's not accurate at all. Now they're played year-round, constantly. So old gens is almost kind of a misnomer. They're just past it. Whatever you want to call them. They're played actively and therefore should be... not tiered actively, as in, let's have a suspect test every 3 months, but if there is a problem, you shouldn't say, just let the people who are playing it for historical purposes or fun or whatever, just let it be for their sake. That's not the argument I'm making. Again, we're just illustrating how we got to this point. So, yeah, you had at this point, post-DPP, as Royal Flush used to call it, then you had mostly, like, Calm Mind Rachis. You had some E-Belt stuff in there, too, but mostly various shades of Calm Mind, with Super Rachi being the most common. And, you know, you had some Scarf in there, obviously. That was, for a long time, Scarfrachi was an iconic DPP Pokemon. It's really fallen out of favor in the last several years. But, yeah, so then we start seeing, then eventually, let's say 2013, then we don't, okay, so, like, the Wish Protect all-out defensive Rachis, a lot of that, when players wanted to use a bulky Wish Jirachi, that would, then they used to go for Wish Call Mine, because that was also a great sweeper. Uh, and then eventually some players started taking a cue from Ubers, where Wish and Protect were common, because you had to stave off, you know, monstrous Soldew, Latios, and other stuff. So, and Wish Call Mine invested in physical defense mostly. And then eventually they got faster, but mostly physical defense. The original ones were like bold, like almost max defense, if not max. Whereas Wish Protect started going with, what's it called? Max special defense. Oh, I will say, of course there were players who were trying to maximize Jirachi's flinch potential. It's not like it was just overlooked. Those who were around back then will remember this player named Matty had this paralysis team. I mean, paralysis teams were around for a while. Jirachi Machamp, what a combo. And the set that popped up during those early-ish 2010 Dragon Suspect Test eras was Substitute T-Wave, Sub T-Wave Ironhead Fire Punch, which probably sounds familiar. You know, the Devil set. And it obviously hides behind subs and abuses paralysis, and you can't touch it, and blah, blah, blah. So that set, you know, had popped up for a while, and obviously drove people crazy. But, and, you know, because there's nothing worse than, oh, my Heatran doesn't have leftovers, guess it loses. And we'll get back to that, because that is, of course, a big thing that people will say to show how Jirachi can whatever. Yeah, so I will... Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. It's been a while since I've done one of these. Okay. So, Sub T-Wave started being used, but that, of course, had issues because with T-Wave, you can't paralyze ground types. So, Pert, Gliscor, Hippo, you know, kind of a pain. So, that set eventually gave way to the more, I would say, immediately destructive Superachi sets, you know, in the wake of the dragons being gone. Because Sub, you think with Ironhead, it's like, oh, just click Ironhead and you win. Because obviously that's not how it works. Obviously, in the hands of a good player, it can be devastating. But that's not quite how it worked. And with Calm Mind, then you're not relying on chance as much. You're just dishing out the damage. I think most players preferred that for a while. So, okay, so now we're in 2013, right? It's a couple of years since DPP quote-unquote ended, but was still being played all the time, so stuff was still developing. And we saw a couple things here. Players like Heist and the French, you know, Ojama and Goten, and Tama, and myself, actually, were playing around with Jirachi stuff. And two things. First of all, Wish Protect started popping up. And number two, well, we started seeing offensive rocks Jirachi that was on the physical side, because previously the cool set was special rocks Jirachi, you know, Akka, Stealth Rock, Psychic T-Bolt, HP Ground, stuff like that. The old Panamaxis set, I think. Pana or Earthworm or someone. And now we started seeing lefties, rocks, Ironhead, Fire Punch. So basically the Sub T-Wave set, but with rocks over Sub, which is cool. And another big thing was that the paralysis move was Body Slam instead of Thunder Wave. So the big thing here is that now you can paralyze Rotom, which is big, and you can't paralyze Gengar, which is also a pain. But you get to paralyze things like Swampert and Gliscor, which is really big, because Gliscor's a pain. And what's even bigger about it is that it does damage while spreading paralysis. And here's a great example of how annoying this can be. Because if you're absorbing like a T-Wave with Starmie or something, then you're not taking damage. So switching around it becomes easier. But when Jirachi's also spreading damage while it's spreading the paralysis, then it becomes even more annoying. And you get the timer you're put on ticks even faster. And that's the big thing about Jirachi. It's not that its iron heads are instantly going to cleave you open, but it's that it sticks around and it tends to mess you up. And and the timer you're on tends to tick very quickly, especially with the passive damage, which is why I chose this thumbnail, which is a lot of hazards, sand, scarms burned. I mean, Jirachi loves these conditions because it doesn't care about toxic or sand, is resistant to rocks, so you can't even double switch to chip it with that. So, yeah, then so we started seeing, wish protect stuff and more and body slam on offensive paralysis Jirachis. So those start being seen more and more. Start becoming part of the collective Jirachi movesets, I guess. Not that they were completely never before seen innovations, obviously. But again, actually, not again, but as I've said in other videos, innovation is not about putting tackle on Groudon. It's about finding a small little variation and then really making it work. So that's what we see Jirachi as now. We see it as this wish protect, unbreakable wall, and but offensively, then it's gonna wear you down, and you're not gonna be able to withstand it. And that's where it started. Okay, so the reason why those wish protect sets started popping up is because they are exceedingly good at shutting down offense. I was going to say random offense, and I wanted to clarify. So, like hyper offense stuff and just general threat stacking, whatever. Not that these teams can't handle Wish Protect Jirachi. In fact, if they're well built, then they should be able to. Well built and well used. That's another big thing. But Jirachi is one of the best, if not the best, because there used to be a lot of concern about random offense just running people over and making games a non-factor. In fact, several years after the set started popping up, then DPP had I think its lowest ever active player base since the generation ended. So a lot of the people that were playing it just because they wanted to play in tournaments or whatever, then they didn't really know the tier, and they started saying stuff like, oh, you have to guess the last, and oh, it's so random, and this phrase, which I hated so much, it was, I hope my last beats your last. I hate it. That is one I will shame anyone for using, because it's, okay, I'm turning over a new leaf. I'm older, wiser, more mature, and really anyone who uses that phrase is just revealing their own ignorance of the tier and their own inability and or unwillingness to adapt to it or to learn it. Coddled by Team Preview? Maybe. No, I'm kidding. Because you don't have... Well, one of the things I always said in response to that is that you do have a similar thing in the previous 3 generations. Anyway. I got into all sorts of stupid arguments like, oh, Team Preview, how would anyone play a non-Team Preview gen? It's like, are you just admitting that you need it to be easier for you? Anyway, that aside, so yeah, and that's why I always found it strange. Okay, and this is why, I think I've mentioned this in the Clefable video. I don't know, that one was a while ago now. But a lot of the complaints from the wider player base who don't really know what they're talking about, they're always kind of contradictory because they don't really know what they want. And Jirachi is an example of this because people will say, oh, I hate random offense. It's so, I have to guess these last Pokemon. This is so hard. I don't know what to do. The tier is clearly at fault here and not me. How come I can't pick up this tier with no experience and instantly understand everything? Stuff like that. And then Jirachi, with its Wish Protect set, shuts these supposed random offense teams down really hard. That's a good thing, right? You would think. That, oh, well, if you're struggling against this cascading barrage of offense, then here's this wall that really helps against that. And then people are like, oh, no, Wish Protect Jirachi, unbreakable wall. Oh, it's so unfair. So And by what I mean by contradictory is also other stuff like, well, the most classic example is some people used to complain, oh, DPP, hazard spam, oh, I don't know how to deal with this. And then Clefable comes along and gives you a great answer. Oh, Clefable's so unfair. It ignores all these hazards and all that. So that's why I stress that I much prefer if the people who are saying let's take it serious like a Jirachi are experienced players, because if it's just some flavor of the month or year or whatever thing, like, oh yeah, clearly this element is overpowered, needs to be dealt with immediately if not sooner, then yeah. And the reason I'm mentioning this as opposed to just ignoring it is because that is what a lot of discourse around these older metagames tends to be. Because, again, there is a more active player base now, which is great, of course, but a lot of it's not like a current gen, obviously. So, and even in current gens, obviously, you have a lot of noise. But I think in current gen, you generally have a more if a lot of people are complaining about something, it generally has more merit. Whereas in past gens, like in let's say Sun and Moon, when everyone was going bananas over Zygarde, like that was for a good reason. Whereas uh, in past gens, then like the complaints I've seen over the last several years is mostly stuff that directly contradicts each other, you know, in a matter of months. Or it doesn't even have to be a tiering opinion. I think I mentioned this in the stall video, so I won't repeat it fully. But stuff like people opinion, yeah, try that again. People's opinions going from, oh yeah, stall is literally unviable right now, to a couple months later, stall is literally so broken right now. It needs to be dealt with. So that's why I'm wary of such opinions. But again, Jirachi does merit some discussion because, as you can see if you followed DPP for the last several years, well, obviously interpretation is a big part of this, but what you don't see is Jirachi instantly winning games against good teams that are used well. What you do see is sometimes Jirachi will just do dumb stuff that takes over a game. Uh, okay, so first of all, I'm trying to organize my thoughts. First of all, I think how Jirachi centralizes the tier, if that's the right word to use, is a good thing because it provides a much needed balance. Second of all, Jirachi is not the only thing that can cascade out of control quickly. Uh, I guess that's more or less it. So for the second point, something like +1 Gyarados Waterfall Flinch can be, a lot more instantly devastating than Jirachi. And, you know, I would even say likely, because Gyarados is a strong Pokemon, and Jirachi is famously not. It has to chain together lots and lots of flinches. Okay, obviously, one of the things that separates Jirachi and, let's say, a Gengar's reliance on Focus Blast is that if Gengar misses Focus Blast on T-Tar or Heatran, it's probably dead. Whereas if Jirachi doesn't get a flinch, then it's probably not ruined because of its great bulk and resilience and move pool and all that stuff. Especially with how it makes use of the best move in the game, Protect, so well, even on offensive sets. So, yes, obviously that's a big difference. So a lot of teams, the basic rule of thumb is if your team is fast and aggressive, you cannot give Jirachi breathing room. But I don't think that's unreasonable, because you also have to have a similar plan for, I don't know, Skarmory, or you're just going to spend the entire game getting spiked on and roosted and whirlwinded out. And if you've got a team that isn't operating at a screaming breakneck pace, then you have to be able to go the distance against it. As much as people like to say, oh yeah, Ironhead will flinch out your whole team, it's like, Jirachi does not exactly flinch out Resthawk Rotoms regularly. Because in these long games, then, Ironhead is 24 PP, which is a lot if you are not able to slow the game down. Which you're going to want to do in general, because a lot of other great DPP Pokemon kind of force that sort of response. It's not like you throw your strongest wall breaker into Clefable. It's like, oh no, there it goes. With the exception of Breloom, of course, but that's one of the things that makes Breloom great. It's an exception. So You have to be able to go the distance. 24 PP is not that much if you spam it. And obviously, you're not just trying to outlast Jirachi. This isn't like there are some stall teams in GSC which, whenever they see Zapdos, their first response is PP stall it. You don't have to KO it. That's not the suggestion here. For Jirachi, then you have to be able to withstand its hits, obviously, but you're not trying to drain it of all 24 Iron Heads. What you're trying to do is withstand it and then carry out your own game plan, like you would against other Pokemon. So, against defensive teams is actually where Jirachi is famously at its worst, and offensive teams have a lot of tools to deal with it, because, again, Steel is bad offensive typing, and yes, it's complemented by Fire Punch and Body Slam. Yeah, okay, so you have to be good against status, which you need to be anyway. That's part of what being good against... And obviously, yes, Jirachi is very good at what it does. It should be. Otherwise, no one would use it. But I personally don't find it at that threshold where it's overbearing. And I think it brings a lot of positives in how it is able to deal with so many Pokemon. Because, yeah, offense is scary. And it's a good thing that we have a Pokemon that's so good at dealing with it. And, Clefable is another example, which also gets complained about. I don't want to chalk this up to, people hate defensive Pokemon being good, because that's probably not accurate. But some of the complaints make me think that, because, yeah, of course, then there's the offensive Jirachi sets being too much thing. Now, that I'm a little more sympathetic to, because with hazard support, yes, Jirachi can be a nightmare. But so can a lot of other Pokemon. Now, yes, maybe not on Jirachi's level, that's why Jirachi's the best, but it's not like those are pure RNG. Like, let's take the earlier leftovers-less Heatran example, right? Like, okay, I should mention one other thing. The one thing I don't like about Jirachi's presence in the metagame is that sometimes it encourages people to just go for the odds, even if they have much better moves. So you could be just... you have no idea how many times I've seen someone who has like 8 Heatran counters at full health on their team, and they decide to just try to solo Lefties less Heatran with their Jirachi. And, okay, usually they're not rewarded for it. And obviously the situation is not usually that extreme. But sometimes they get rewarded for it, and that happens. Yeah, that sucks. And I don't like that Jirachi... I don't think it encourages that. I think that's just a reflection of the player base, because I think I've noticed in a lot of other gens, then people will try to just go for odds really quickly just because they're tempting or whatever reason you want to attribute it to. And yeah, that sucks, but that happens in every tier ever. How many times have you had or seen a game where someone made the objectively worst play, but they got the odds, and yeah, you could say, oh, well, Jirachi is unlike any others. And I would say, yeah, Jirachi, if it's going to try and pull stuff like that, then it's going to need a lot of flinch, and it's probably not going to work out for it. So, because people, yes, they remember the one game they saw where Jirachi flinched at a full health Heatran. Honestly, that is really, really rare. But what they don't remember is all the times where Jirachi just kind of thudded out against a team that could hold its own in a prolonged assault. So, yeah, a lot of stuff. I mean, hello, Scald. How many times have we seen people just go for Scald burns in situations where they really shouldn't? Just because, I need to get that burn. I'll get it for sure. That's... So, yeah, Pokemon does reward dumb stuff a disproportionate amount of the time. I don't think that Jirachi encouraging it is enough to push it over the edge. Okay, so back to the leftovers less Heatran example, or, Empoleon or Magnezone, the quad resist, basically. Or even like a really bulky resist like Swampert or Metagross. So those are not at risk of getting flinched out from full as much as they are getting worn down over the course of a game. Because of hazards and chip damage, and Jirachi being resilient to that stuff. That's true. So there are a lot of games where that's another reason why Jirachi shouldn't be trying to flinch those Heatrans out. It's like, dude, just switch, and the Heatran's going to get worn down way before you do, and then you have free reign. So, yeah, that just is part of building your team to not fall apart to Jirachi, because it is now you used to have these frail offensive teams where like the steel resists were like Infernape and Scarf Rotom. And like maybe an offensive water type that doesn't have any bulk, and it's like, yeah, okay, no wonder you're losing to Jirachi. You would lose to any steel type move because rocks and sand go up and you're just crumbling to it. You can't have, unless your team is really operating at that screaming pace, then you can't afford to you can't afford to switch into Jirachi once and chase it out. If your team isn't really that fast. So yeah, Jirachi does force a lot of team building shifts, but that's good. It's good to have such a force. It's good that you can have that defensive piece, that pillar holding the metagame together, and that would prevent real... Well, I don't know how the metagame would look without Jirachi. I think some people want to test a metagame without Jirachi and Latias, which I don't know. Well, on one hand, they can do whatever they want, because I really don't care. But on the other, it just... the part of me that, lives and breathes DPP even now, it's just like, what is going on? I mean, I don't know. If it's just like a for fun thing, then it's not going to hurt anyone. And it might be fun. But the idea of putting that to an actual suspect, maybe I'm just getting old and unable to comprehend new technology. It's like, so how does this phone work? But, I don't know. It's not even that it's a part of the tier's identity. I really don't think it's busted. I mean, yeah, okay, the RNG, the Jirachi Fire Punch burning stuff is infuriating. That, I agree. That's horrible. That is, yeah. But for all the, I don't know, but then you have stuff like Clefable, which could not care less about all the rocks and spikes and toxic and burn and sand flying around. Like, Bold Clefable is like one of the best Pokemon you can possibly throw into... Actually, it probably is the best Pokemon you can throw into. It doesn't even care about paralysis because Magikarp doesn't let it full para. And then people want to get rid of Clefable. My god. Clefable stops all the hazard spam and the Jirachis, and it's like, oh, get rid of this thing. Yeah. I feel like I have to clarify and like request that I don't get oversimplified here a lot. And I apologize if that seems redundant, but as someone who's been getting into tiering arguments for over a decade, then I promise that's most of what they are. Someone says something seemingly reasonable, and the other person twists it and goes, oh, you're really saying oversimplified nonsense version of this. So, yeah. So, the best comparison I can think of for Jirachi's Iron Head shenanigans is something else people were complaining about in advance a long time ago, which was DD Tar and CB Arrow and their Rock Slide spam, which, with spikes and sand, oh my god, and the flinch rate, oh my god, and it's game breaking, and da-da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, so, that was something people really wanted to get rid of. And it's similar because it's like a flinch rate, obviously, and it's, with sand and spikes, then you can't even keep these bulky Pokemon alive long enough, and it's so easy to get rid of their checks, and even their checks can be, flinched out, and, T-Tar can even take a hit, and all this stuff. And, yeah, obviously Jirachi is a lot more defensively apt than those two, because it has a lot more variety to its sets, and all the other stuff we know about Jirachi. But it's a similar kind of idea in that the overwhelming consensus of why DD Tar and Arrow and Rock Slide as a whole or whatever doesn't need to be banned is the fact that you have to consider how you're going to be able to deal with not just them, but them in conjunction with sand and spikes. That's a big part of shaping the metagame in a balanced way. So you can't just throw together, whatever screaming offense with no thoughts of defensive synergy whatsoever. Because however fast you are, Arrow's going to outspeed you and Rock Slide your face off. And that's a good thing. So similarly with Jirachi, you can't just throw together, a barrage of wall breakers, because otherwise Jirachi's probably going to get in your way. So, and again, that's a good thing. I think it's good that, because it's not like Jirachi's making offense unviable. Far from it. Very, very far from it. And you can tell when someone is really good at DPP because they know not just how to withstand Jirachi, but how to exploit an opponent who over-relies on it. It's like, oh, well, this guy's going to try and run my whole team over the Jirachi. Oh, okay, well, my Empoleon's in, and it doesn't care about any of this because it's a defensive Empoleon. It's going to knock off the entire team, and it's going to be obnoxious, and they're not going to be able to win that long game. Oh, I've got a Rest Talk Rotom, and he's going to need to, or they're going to need to rely on, like, 11 consecutive flinches or something, and just not going to work. And even if they do get those 11 consecutive flinches, then they're not going to have many Iron Heads remaining, and then, the Rotom example was not as precise as the Empoleon one. But, like, or even the Clefable one. It's like, oh, well, they want to spam body slams and fire punches, and that's just free entry for my Clefable. Thank you. So, it's not like Jirachi is risk-free. Like, some people say, oh, Jirachi is risk-free. Jirachi should be on every team. There's literally no reason not to use it, which is, no. I don't even think it's the best Pokemon in the tier anymore. For a while, yeah, but honestly, no, I don't know. Just because it really needs its teammates. And yes, it's amazing at cleaning up, and it is... Okay, so a while ago then, a long while ago, then Scarf Flygon was cleaning up offense like nothing else. And it's easy to see why. Because it has great stabs, and those offensive teams aren't that bulky, and they dip in a Flygon range pretty quickly. And it's kind of similar with Jirachi. Yeah, okay, it's an Iron Head. Iron Head contributes to it, but when Jirachi is at its most dangerous is not when it's trying to flinch out a full health Bold Zapdos. It's when it's a late game and everything is weakened, and it's not the fact that it's Iron Heading your whole team at that point. It's the fact that it's so bulky, it can take a hit, and it's fast, and it can finish you off easily. So... yeah, I mean, like, yeah, someone will say, oh, well, it flinched out my offensive Suicune. Offensive Suicune can barely deal with Jirachi anyway. I mean, so if you're relying on offensive Suicune who's vulnerable to rocks and sands, and that's all it needs, it doesn't need the spikes or the poison or anything else, then, yeah, Jirachi's going to mess you up. But if you have, like, a Crocoon or something, that's something else. So it does force teams into a more longevity-oriented state, and I think that's a good thing, because I don't really buy into, like, oh, this is just a clash of random offense with no rhyme or reason. I don't really buy into that, but if you do buy into that, you should want Jirachi around. So, the one thing I can sympathize with, I mentioned this earlier, is what if Iron Head were banned instead? I mean, who cares if Scizor and Metagross can't use Iron Head? Nobody uses those. Nobody uses Iron Head on those. Technically, some people used to use Iron Head on Scarf Scizor, which is kind of funny. And theoretically, Scarf or Lead Metagross can use Iron Head if you don't want to miss Meteor Mash, but no one's going to do that. But, yeah, if you just ban Iron Head, you get to keep Jirachi, and, I mean, because a lot of the stuff Jirachi does is by virtue of its Steel typing and Wish and Move Pool and all that, and its stats, and Iron Head is, I'm not going to say almost secondary, but it kind of is. Because, here's a great example. A lot of those Wish Protect sets, like, those that are like, oh, this is so broken. It's like, yeah, those, a lot of those have been used without Iron Head. I've seen Wish Protect U-Turn Toxic, Wish Protect U-Turn Stealth Rock, stuff like that. Where's the Iron Head? You don't need it. It still does what it needs to do by virtue of its typing, stats, and move pool. So if you got rid of Iron Head, it would still be a great cleaner, obviously, because remember at the beginning of this video, what were we talking about? Calm Mind Jirachis without an Iron Head in sight. Actually, some people used to use Calm Mind Iron Head Jirachi. But, that's cool and all because it hits T-Tar specifically, and it could help with, like, Blissey and stuff before. But it's also not very good coverage, and Calm Mind Jirachi has coverage issues as is, so that's why it's not very common. But it's cool, yeah, I'm going to flinch something into +1, but there's a reason. It's not as reliable. And what draws people to Jirachi is the reliability. What draws people to Jirachi is the ability to be safe against the big threats in the metagame. It is not, LOL, I'm going to flinch out this guy's whole team. No one good does that. Because you can't. Because you won't against anyone good. Obviously, there's some games where Jirachi is going to do stupid stuff that only Jirachi could do. That stuff happens in general. I'll go back to the Gyarados example because that's if you played DPP, then you know how quickly a Gyarados flinch can spiral a game out of control. Oh, whoops, there goes my Rotom. There goes my Zapdos. And you say, oh, well, your team shouldn't collapse to Gyarados after one flinch. That's on you. It's like, yeah. So tell me about all these really safe Gyarados checks that there are in the metagame. There aren't exactly a lot. It's not like a team who goes, oh, well, my first Gyarados check went down, but let me go to my second and third. So that's what I'm saying. Jirachi promotes not just good team building or conscientious team building, because you can't collapse to it after a flinch or 2 or 3 or 4. Obviously, you need to be able to stick around with it, but also play, because you can't just play haphazardly. It's like, oh, whoops, there goes my Swampert, and I guess I lose to Jirachi. No. Oh, no, this tier is so awful. You have to keep it in mind. I think that's good. I think it's good when there are elements in metagames that promote less autopilot teams and strategies and play, and really force you to engage with it actively. And it promotes metagame knowledge and participation and stuff like that, as opposed to just what I always called cynically autopiling, where you grab some team off a PokePaste someone sent you, and then you just kind of click and you hope it works out. And if it doesn't work out, then it was clearly the tier's fault. Oh, this metagame element is so stupid. I think that's more or less everything I wanted to say about Rachi. I realize it's a contentious issue, and again, if I get it, I don't love facing it either. It does stupid stuff only Jirachi can, but yeah, I think it's fine. I think I would be interested if there were to be a suspect test. Then I would be interested in an Iron Headless Jirachi suspect, or just an Iron Headless metagame, whatever. I don't care if you ban it only on Jirachi or just in general. If we ban Arena Trap on Diglett, then we can ban Arena Trap and therefore ban it on Diglett and Trapinch. Then we can ban Iron Head too. So, yeah, I would say that should be tried first, and rather than just initially jumping the gun to Jirachi as a whole. So, yeah, if there are any questions or debates, then I'm happy to answer, because I realize, this is my opinion, and, yeah, of course, Jirachi can take over. I'm repeating myself there, so I'm going to stop. So, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this was informative. I'm looking forward to whatever you guys say about Rachi and its place in the metagame and whatnot. And, either way, I think this video has some interesting points, even if you disagree. So, yeah, it's always important to have a dialogue about this stuff rather than just going into the instant ban hammer mode. So, yeah, we're going to finish on this lovely zoom of Jirachi doing what it does. So, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.